Okay guys, for lesson 9.6, which is model equivalent fractions, you're going to need a sheet of paper or, definitely a sheet of paper, and then maybe a crayon or a colored pencil. I don't have one of those with me, but I'll try my best without that. Because today we're going to model equivalent fractions. And so two or more fractions that name the same amount are called equivalent fractions. So you can use a sheet of paper to model fractions equivalent to 1/2. So first you fold a sheet of paper into two equal parts, and then you open the paper and count the parts. So here, if I fold my paper into two equal parts, and then I open it up, I have 2 equal parts, okay? So there are 2 equal parts, and each part is 1/2 of the paper, okay? So I'm gonna write 1/2 down here. 1/2 and 1/2, okay? So now when I fold my paper, I've got 1/2 here, and I've got 1/2 here, okay? Now you're supposed to shade one of the halves, but instead I'm just gonna use some lines here, because I don't have colored pencils with me, unfortunately. Okay. So the one with all the lines on it, the zebra striped one, that's 1/2, and then the other half doesn't have anything on it. So next, fold the paper in half 2 times. So here's 1 time, and then I'm gonna fold the paper in half again. Okay, so if I fold the paper in half 2 times and open it back up, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 equal parts. Now I've got 4 equal parts, and each part is worth 1/4 of the paper. So I'm going to write 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4. Okay, so now I've got these 4 equal parts. Okay, so lastly, they want us to fold the paper in half 3 times. So here's my 1 time, my 2 time, and now 3 times. Okay, now there are, let's see how many equal parts there are. So 1, 2, open up, come on. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now there are 8 equal parts, and each part is 1/8 of the paper. So now I'm going to write 1/8 on each of my papers. 1/8, 1/8, 1/8, 1/8, 1/8, 1/8, 1/8, and 1/8. Okay? Now find the fractions equivalent to 1/2 of your paper. So if I just want to show 1/2 of my paper, well, what fractions are equivalent? Well, I can do, how many fourths do I have? 1/4 and 2/4. Okay, so I've got 2/4. And 1, 2, 3, 4/8. 4/8. So 1/2, 2/4, and 1, 2, 3, 4/8 are all equivalent. So explain how many 1/8 are equivalent to 1/4 parts. Well, if I just want to look at my 1/4 part here, I've got 1/8 and 2/8. So I've got 2 1/8 parts in 1/4. So 2/8 equals 1/4. And remember, the equal sign says that these are equivalent. So remember, two or more numbers that have the same value or the same amount are named equivalent. So what do we notice about how the numerators change for the shaded part as you fold the paper? So as I folded, I started off with 2, and then I went to 4. Oh, sorry. We're looking at the denominators. Sorry, the question was about the numerators. So the numerators, what do we notice about how the numerators change for the shaded part as you fold the number? Okay, so I went from a numerator of 1. Now I've got a numerator of 2 as I combine them. Now I've got a numerator of 4 as I add them all together. So the numerators got larger. And what does this tell you about the change in the number of parts? That means the number of parts increased. Okay, that means that we had more parts every time that we folded the paper. And how did the denominators change for the shaded parts as you folded? Well, I went from 2 to 4, so that's doubled, and then 4 to 8, and that's doubled as well. So they doubled. So every time I folded the paper, I doubled the number of parts. And what does this tell you about the change in the size of parts? The size of the parts got smaller, because we know when the denominator gets higher, that means that it's split into more parts. So you can also use a number line to find equivalent fractions. So you're going to find a fraction that's equivalent to 2/3, okay? So if you've got your fraction strips, this will help you quite a bit. If I've got a number line and I've split it into thirds at the bottom, and at the top they want to split it into sixths. So I know that 3/3 and 6/6, since they both equal 1 whole, they're both going to be here. And then we have to start with 0. So 0/6 and 0/3. That's both 0. So I've got 1/6. That means my next one is going to be 2/6. And then 3/6. And 4/6. And 5/6. Okay. And now it asks me to find an equivalent fraction for 2/3, which is right here. So I draw a point on the number line to represent the distance of 2/3. Now, as I said, if you had your fraction strips out with you, you would have been able to use that to help you divide it up into sixths. And at the end of each strip, draw a mark on the number line and label the marks to show the sixth. In step 3, identify the fraction that names the same point as 2/3, and that one is 4/6. And remember, guys, this is much, much easier if you've got your fraction strips. So 2/3 equals 4/6. So we're going to do a couple of the share and show together, but the lesson on this part is quite long, so I'm going to give you some time to practice this on your own. So I'm going to do this one with you. So shade the model, then divide the pieces to find the equivalent fraction. So it wants me to shade 1/4, 1/4, and then I'm going to divide it evenly. And now I've got eighths, right? Because that's what they told me to divide it into. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But how many eighths do I have now? 1, 2, 2 eighths. Okay, and remember this denominator here told me how many boxes I needed, how many pieces it needed to be divided into. Okay, and the same thing is going to happen in this one. You could figure out how many pieces to divide this into by looking at the denominator. So right now it's divided into 3, and now it wants you to divide it into 6. Okay, so now we're going to use the number line to find the equivalent fraction. So here they've already built the number lines for you, which is really handy. So on one side of the number line, at the top side, we've got divided into sixths. Okay, so it goes all the way from 0/6 to 6/6, which is the same as 1 whole. On the bottom side, we're only dividing it into halves. So really, I've only got the 3. I've got 0, I've got 1/2, and then I've got 2/2, which is 1 whole. So they want you to find the point where 1/2 is. 1/2 is right here. And that means it is equal to, it's equivalent to 3/6. Okay? So I want you to finish the rest of these on your own, because there's not a lot of opportunity for practice in this lesson, because this one is just one big activity altogether. If you guys are having trouble with this unit, or if I end up having to send this back to you a bit for some corrections, I do want you to do this one in the Skinny book. Okay, so lesson 9.6, probably do this one in the Skinny book. Okay? All right, guys, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you later today.